We're now going to take a few minutes for a meditation period, for reflection and quiet. I'll signal 3 minutes with a gong at each end, and then we'll have a song. During that song, we'd like to have you come up and light a candle if you wish. Say a prayer, perhaps. The future, with its gaping maw, seeks to gorge on my thoughts. Instead, I choose to sit in the present, in the presence, exchanging thoughts with the divine, each one a gift. Don Keeble. want to make sure I haven't broken the microphone. There. Searching for the soul. Those of you who want the Cliff Notes, I didn't find out. If you were waiting for the answer, you can go now. 3 quotes, please. Robert Goddard, History of Rocket Technology, 1963. It is difficult to say what is impossible, for the dream of yesterday is the hope of today and the reality of tomorrow. Will Durant, the hope of another life gives us courage to meet our own death and to bear with the death of our loved ones. We are twice armed if we fight with faith. Herbert Spencer, there is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all argument, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. This principle is contempt prior to examination. Here's where this started. I was talking to a woman that I met in Austin, a psychotherapist, and she confided sometimes she occasionally hypnotizes her patients who need to understand why they came to this life, to reconnect to their soul's mission in this incarnation, and sometimes to dig back further to preceding incarnations to discover the path of their soul's journey, and if they had lost their way in this carnal state. Well, my first thought was, well, she's from Austin, you know. She said there are a lot of therapists in Austin who do this. Many of them won't talk about it, or don't talk about it. But I was very intrigued with this, and I thought about it. I recalled books and movies and things that I'd heard about afterlife and reincarnation. One of my favorite books and subsequent movies was What Dreams May Come, Robin Williams. I thought I loved that movie. This is good, wasn't it? It was about a couple who are soulmates who visit and revisit this earthly plane together. I am a nurse anesthetist by profession, and I've had some number of patients tell me that they have experienced death and that no longer are they frightened, that it was a blissful, sublime experience and preferable to life, and that if they could, they would happily go there again. In preparing for this talk, I've heard amazing stories from lots of folks who have experiences that fall out of life's normal rules. I don't know if you can see it. This is often in the newspaper. It accompanies the obituaries. I made it home. I just wanted to let you know. Everything is so pretty here, so white, so fresh, so new. I wish that you could close your eyes so you could see it too. Please try not to be sad for me. Try to understand. God is taking care of me. I'm in the shelter of His hands. Here there is no sadness, no sorrow, no pain. Here there is no crying, and I'll never hurt again. Here it is so peaceful when all the angels sing. I really have to go now. I've just got to try my wings. P.S. I'll be the first face you see when you get here. I wanted to look deeper. I considered history, religion, mysticism, testimony, science, psychology, psychiatry, theology, physics, metaphysics, poetry, song, art, literature. No doubt I'd find more along the way. I found lots of contradictions. I'll start now with a definition, please. Let's say that the soul is a spiritual, immortal, incorporeal essence of an individual. The word comes from early Germanic swallow, from the lake, supposedly where souls were living before and after death. Maybe in the King Arthur legend, the Lady of the Lake is swallow. Spirit is associated with breath or air in Hebrew, the words nephesh and ruah, and in Latin, animus or spiritus, breath, spirit. I found that some people feel very strongly that spirit and soul are quite different things, but for this talk, I'm lumping them together. There's evidence of prehistoric peoples believing in an aspect distant from and residing in the body. Both the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Chinese believed that a part survived death but stayed near the body, and a part that proceeded to the region of the dead. For the Chinese, that's the bit of ancestor worship. I looked at religion. Modern religions like Christianity, Islam, Judaism have gone to great lengths to argue that humans have souls. This is despite the fact that their scriptures do not endorse the idea of souls. Confused? The leaders of the main faiths have taken some pretty contradictory positions on the existence of the soul. It has been endorsed, denied, preached for, preached against, declared heretical, and declared essential. Judaism and the Old Testament are the origins of the ideas of Christianity and Islam. The modern concept of immortal soul is not found in the Hebrew Scriptures or in the Old Testament. In the Hebrew mind, we are composed of multiple parts. The body is the flesh and bones, the vessel. The organs are viewed as the seats of thought, the heart, the emotion, the kidneys, intuition, your gut, etc. The breath is one's character, what makes a person who they are. The soul is the whole of the person, the unity of the body, organs, and breath. It is not some immaterial spiritual entity. Life is breathed into man by God and created from dust. Christianity's Old Testament does not endorse the idea of an eternal soul separate from the body. Instead, consciousness and the body die in the grave, but the flesh is to be resurrected whole on the day of resurrection. Ancient Greek views were opposed. Plato held that the soul was a distinct entity that enters the body from a spiritual world and uses the body as an instrument, while Aristotle held that the soul was merely a part of the body and thus dies with it. Jewish and Christian writers later sought to reconcile emerging concepts and interpreted previous pagan and Old Testament writings with Greek concepts. Islamic philosophies interacted and blended with Greek and Hebrew thought and influenced the Kabbalah with Neoplatonic ideas of spirit as immortal. Some religions hold that mountains or rivers have souls. Animals can have souls. Hinduism holds that all living things are the souls themselves, but have their physical representative in the world. That body is the mechanism to experience the karma of life. The cycle of death and rebirth is eternal according to some, but others say it persists only until the soul has attained karmic perfection, thus merging with the Absolute. Buddhism negates the concept not only of the individual self, but of the soul as well, asserting that any sense of partaking in a persistent universal self is illusory. Slide 2, please. This is from a French painter, Louis Jameau, of the 1860s. It's called The Flight of the Soul, Angels Coming to Get a Soul. I looked at philosophy. Ancient Greek concepts of the soul varied considerably according to the particular era and philosophical school. The Epicureans considered the soul to be made up of atoms like the rest of the body, and the soul ended at death. The early Christian philosophers adopted the Greek concept of immortality and thought that the soul was being created by God and infused into body at conception. St. Augustine spoke of the soul as a rider on the body, making clear the split between the material and the immaterial. St. Thomas Aquinas returned to the Greek philosopher's concept of the soul as motivating principle of the body, independent, but requiring the substance of the body to make an individual. But from the Middle Ages onward, the existence and nature of the soul and its relationship to the body continued to be disputed in Western philosophy. René Descartes, the 17th century philosopher, mathematician, and scientist, saw man as a union of the body and soul, each a distinct substance acting on the other. The soul resided in the pineal gland, which today we know is an endocrine gland that produces melatonin, has influence over the sex hormones. Kant concluded that the soul was not demonstrable through reason. William James, at the beginning of the 20th century, believed the soul was a collection of psychic phenomena. Psychologist James Hillman, departing from the Cartesian dualism, felt that between outer tangible reality and inner states of mind, there was a third and middle position in which the soul resides. He felt that modern psychology was reductive, materialistic, too literal, and thus psychology without psyche, without soul. Please let me read, I think, a cool quote from Carl Jung. Rationalism and doctrinarism are the disease of our time. They pretend to have all the answers, but a great deal will yet be discovered which our present limited view would have ruled out as impossible. Our concepts of space and time have only approximate validity, and there is, therefore, a wide field for minor and major deviations. In view of all this, I lead an attentive ear to the strange myths of the psyche, and take a careful look at the varied events that come my way, regardless of whether or not they fit in with my theoretical postulates. Unfortunately, the mythic side of man is given short shrift nowadays. He can no longer create fables. As a result, a great deal escapes him, for it is important and salutary to speak also of incomprehensible things. The question of immortality is so urgent, so immediate, and so eradicable that we must make an effort to form some sort of view about it. Leaving aside the rational arguments against any certainty in these matters, Jung was pretty wordy. We must not forget that for most people it means a great deal to assume that their lives will have an indefinite continuity beyond their present existence. They live more sensibly, they feel better, are more at peace. One has centuries. One has an inconceivable period of time at one's disposal. Otherwise, what then is the point of this senseless mad rush? A man should be able to say he has done his best to form a conception of life after death, or to create some image of it, even if he must confess his failure. Not to have done so is a vital loss. For the question that is posed to him is the age-old heritage of humanity, an archetype, rich in secret life, which seeks to add itself to our own individual life in order to make it whole. Reason sets the boundaries far too narrowly for us, and would have us accept only the known, and that too with limitations, and live in a known framework, just as if we were sure how far life actually extends. End quote. Science. In 1901, Duncan McDougall conducted an experiment in which he made weight measurements of patients as they died. He concluded that the soul weighs 21 grams. The physicist Robert L. Park has written that McDougall's experiments are not regarded today as having any scientific merit, and the psychologist Bruce Hood wrote that because the weight loss was not reliable nor replicable, his findings are unscientific. Since the 19th century, the tide has turned. Science has trumped religion on the matter of souls. Lengthy and detailed neurological and biochemical investigations have shown comprehensively that the soul, the self, our emotions and consciousness, all are biological, all are literal, all are earthly in nature, and just as manipulatable and damageable as other physical systems. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, famous for her contribution to death and dying, for her stages of grief, made contributions to us all. But then she crossed over to the metaphysical and described spirits waiting to help the living enter the afterlife. She declared that there was no such thing as death. She was thereafter discredited by the scientific community. The current scientific consensus across all fields is that there is no evidence for the existence of any kind of soul in the traditional sense. Modern scientists hold that the mind is merely a complex machine that operates in the same physical laws as all other objects in nature. There is no scientific evidence whatsoever to support the existence, and there is considerable evidence that seems to indicate that souls do not exist. Near-death experiences are disorders of hypoxic neurons in the brain, and that lighted tunnel is but the hypoxic eye. Spirits of loved ones coming to get us are memories stimulated by malfunctioning brain cells. If physics can't explain it, it doesn't exist. Physicists apparently feel that the idea of a soul is incompatible with quantum field theory. Not only is new physics required, but dramatically new physics. Within quantum field theory, there can't be a new collection of spirit particles or spirit forces that interact with our regular atoms because we would have detected them in existing experiments. Number 3, please. This is the Flammarion engraving. Its original use is not certain, but it's commonly used now to indicate that there is a veil between this life and the other, and that if you just find the path through it, you can see what else lies in our universe. An example of Western eclectic ideas of how to combine science and spirituality, think New Age, is in Helena Blavatsky's Theosophy. This is but one example, where the soul is the field of our psychological activity, thinking, emotions, memory, desires, will, and so on, as well as the so-called paranormal or psychic phenomena, like extrasensory perception, out-of-body experiences, etc. The soul acts as a link between the material body and the spiritual self, and therefore shares some characteristics of both. The soul can be attracted either towards the spiritual or towards the material realm, and being thus the battlefield of good and evil. It is only when the soul is attracted towards the spiritual and merges with the self that it becomes eternal and divine. So this was the fun part of this study. I asked people, hey, do you have any weird experiences about the soul? And man, did I hear a lot. It was very fascinating. I'll bet a bunch of you in the audience would raise your hand if I asked. I've decided not to ask. Not for any particular reason. But. Now, one person, a very bright and perceptive individual that I know, a hospice nurse of many years, says that she can see the spirits who come to get the dying through the veil that separates us from this next reality. She tells me that she can sense energies unfelt by most people, that she is naturally intuitive and has worked very hard over many years to develop her abilities. She can sense old wounds in a house. She can sense terrible trauma on a battlefield. She uses Reiki channeling to heal, crystals to focus energies to expand meditation, healing, and communicating. She is quietly confident in her beliefs. She's attended numerous events. I discovered that there are conventions held all around where advocates meet and teach and lecture and share. See, for example, afterlifeconference.com. Another person had an out-of-body experience that was an astral projection. And this person absolutely knew, just swears he knows, that he could essentially instantly transfer to any location. But he felt a suspicion that something was wrong, and he pulled back into his body, and he felt extremely oxygen deprived. He took a giant breath, and he was convinced that if he hadn't, his mortal shell would be dead. He's convinced that this was a malign, demonic temptation. My mother, in her last days of hospice at my home, saw her father and mother, many years dead, drive up to get her. She told them she wasn't quite ready. They'd have to come back. Another person feels a powerful assurance that she has lived in South Texas in a previous life as a First People. A lawyer I know assures me that police investigators follow the leads when a medium approaches them. A friend, Charmin, tells me that at about 19, her best friend died in a car crash. Many years later, Charmin was almost in a similar accident. She felt the presence of her friend enter her body, jerk the wheel, and save her. She is sure it was her friend. She says, like lots of people say, I haven't shared this with anyone before, but I really know this happened. Then there are ghost stories. My friend Linda sometimes would see her grandparents and her granduncle long after their death at the kitchen table playing canasta or cards at the old house in Fredericksburg her grandmother left to her. I asked Linda, was that frightening? She said, of course not. They loved me and I loved them. Another friend of mine went to this house with her husband on a deer hunting trip. She said, she swore, she awoke in the wee hours, very cold, with a strange old woman's visage peering down into her face. Well, she freaked, of course, and drew the covers over her head, and when she looked again, there was nothing there. But the next morning, upon telling Linda what she saw, Linda got a photo of Linda's grandmother, and this person felt strongly that's who she'd seen. Now, some people accept the metaphysical without question or doubt. Some people immediately dismiss it as craziness. I went to a mystic fair at the Emerald Beach Holiday Inn a couple of weeks ago. I found practitioners, vendors of metaphysical services and lotions, crystals, etc., tarot readings, Reiki, healers using light, chant, energy aligning maneuvers, focusing on restoring our chi, our chakras, etc. Folks assuring me that they knew their previous lives and deaths and incarnations. My brother is convinced that he knows the truth of Christianity. He has carefully read the original Greek or Hebrew. He is absolutely convinced of his knowledge of the end of times, of resurrection, of the right way to live, of heaven and God. What astounds me is the flat denial and the flat acceptance of these concepts. Who's to say? What's the common theme? Well, I think it must be the need to understand, to make more of this short earthly life, to find comfort in an explanation or belief that restores our loved ones taken from us, to make our earthly sacrifices and accomplishments last beyond this brief life. Is it all fable? Is it all a lie? Or is it somehow all true? Robert Bellah, who writes about sociology of religion, reminds us, quote, we don't come from nowhere. We are embedded in a deep biological and cosmological history. Now, this little discussion concerns religion and where it came from, but I think it applies. Evolutionists see the origin of religion in the social needs of our ancestors moving onto the plains and needing to work cooperatively, living communally. Natural selection was able to accomplish this astonishing feat by enhancing the emotional palettes that had long been available And now, with a broader set of emotions, the early hominin brain was then able to enhance some of its capabilities, some of which quite naturally lent themselves a religious way of being. As these capacities got more acutely enhanced with the growth of the Homo brain and the development of the neocortex, behaviors such as play and ritual entered a new phase in hominin development, becoming raw materials out of which cultural evolution would begin to lead to religion. Even the most seemingly autonomous human decision is made from within history. And that's the big picture here. That's what we've been keeping in mind as we make our way back in time to the evolutionary seeds that would eventually and quite slowly blossom into human religion. Religion is an embodied phenomenon because the human religious way of being has evolved for millions of years as bodies of our ancestors interacted with the other bodies around them. Whether or not one takes communion, whether or not one feels religious, we at all times are navigating our social worlds with our evolved capacities to play, to empathize, to celebrate rituals with each other. Perhaps immortality is similar. So, my conclusion, like the Zen parable, my cup, if full, can't hold any more. Belief in the soul is comforting. So is religion. Are both metaphor? Science and pragmatism suggest that both are merely fallacious optimism. However, both give us a hopeful tool to deal with the question of life's end. It seems to me that if you accept only natural law, scientific method, you end up with a monotonous, uninspired existence like a computer, potentially cold and unfeeling. If, however, you accept immortality, spirit, and soul, you must accept the supernatural. I guess the balance for me lies somewhere in the middle. Music, song, poetry, art, religion, theater, dance, storytelling, all can be magic, moving and powerful gifts above and beyond the normal. One reason we invented art might have been to help us cope with the terrible gifts of consciousness and self-awareness that our bulging, deeply furrowed brains bestowed upon us. We know that we and our loved ones are going to die. We know that we're miserable, flawed creatures. We may not be as bad as our neighbors, but still. We need distraction. We need understanding. We need to attempt to express the inexplicable. So I am going to open up to both. I'm not going to dismiss the supernatural. I'm going to be open to the deeper message found within. Now, how might we accomplish this? Well, we could start with a song. Some things in life are bad. They can really make you mad. Other things just make you swear and curse. When you're chewing on life's gristle, don't grumble, give a whistle. And this'll help things turn out for the best. And always look for the bright side of life. Everybody sing. Oh, always look on the bright side of life. If life seems jolly rotten, there's something you've forgotten, and that's to laugh and smile and dance and sing. And when you're feeling in the dumps, don't be silly chumps. Purse your lips and whistle, that's the thing. And always look on the bright side of life. Come on, always look on the bright side of life. For life is quite absurd, and death's the final word. You must always face the curtain with a bow. Forget about your sin. Give the audience a grin. Enjoy it. It's your last chance anyhow. So always look on the bright side of death. Just before you draw your terminal breath. Oh, life's a laugh and death's a joke, it's true. You'll see it's all a show. Keep 'em laughing as you go. And remember, the last laugh is on you. Oh, I'll come to this one. Always look on the light side of life. Oh, always look on the bright side of life. Can we have that one again? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Look on the bright side of life. Keep it going. What have you got to lose? You know you come from nothing. You go back to nothing. What have you lost? Nothing. Always look on the bright side of life. Worst things happen at sea, you know. Always look on the bright side of life. Yay!